My guest today is someone who I've wanted to have this conversation with long before this podcast was even born. A friend introduced us, and I knew immediately that we needed to meet. He's one of those rare people whom conversations about the soul, spirit, intuition, healing, and consciousness feel completely natural. We can be laughing one moment and crying the next. Somehow it all feels entirely at home. He's someone that I feel completely safe with, someone I trust to explore the deeper questions of birth, breath, and death, beyond the surface and beyond the small talk. He is a psychic medium and spirit messenger, Tyrone Cusack. Tyrone, welcome. It is such a joy to have you here.
Thank you, Tonda. That was such a beautiful introduction. I hope that I can live up to the standard of what you've set for this beautiful podcast that you've created. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Oh, fantastic. Well done. So before we dive in, I should probably warn our listeners that they might hear a little bit of like the occasional "eish, yeah, sure," because we both grew up in South Africa.
Absolutely, yeah.
And when I think back to little Tando growing up in Durban and in Soweto, I remember being so full of questions, big questions, things like, where do babies come from? What happens after we die? Like, why are we here? All these like huge questions that me as like a 5, 6, 7 year old was just fascinated by. And I remember I would sometimes like look into the eyes of like a baby and just feel like they come from this place of like so much knowing and insight. And it was something that I almost like from a place maybe where I couldn't quite remember being there, but it was just like, I desperately want to understand this. And the same with elders, just the
Yeah,
wisdom that they
exactly.
have. And I guess growing up, I didn't have lots of people to maybe explore these conversations with. So when I think about the fact that we both grew up in South Africa, I sometimes go, oh man, I would have loved to have a friend like Tyrone. I can imagine little Tando and little Tyrone just exploring these big questions.
I think
Um,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I think I was pretty similar to you, having the big questions, because obviously I didn't know what I know now then, but similarly to you, it was those big questions like, what is the meaning of this? Where does this come from? And having a sense of maybe a willingness to try and remember what was known. I do miss talking about it now. You're making me all nostalgic. Is I think the purity and the innocence, the unscathed conditioning to just be literally a spiritual explorer in those questions and growing up in different spaces and places.
Yes, absolutely. And also curiosity about life as well, just that openness and like, oh, I can't wait to learn and to
And
discover and to
discover.
maybe try and answer some of these questions. So,
Yeah,
sometimes people talk about finding their calling, but I think sometimes our calling finds us as well.
that's very true.
When did you first realize that this is what you had come here to do?
I think it was only later in life. I had a lot of spiritual experiences as a young child, particularly, which is quite apropos talking about, having this discussion in your podcast, was when actually my sister was brought home from the hospital. And I remember just having this incredibly deep sense of connection, like really recognizing maybe I didn't know the terminology of a soul to soul connection, but there was definitely a deepness and a depth to the connection that was shared. And it was only later, as I sort of grew up, that my mom started to inform us that we actually shared a telepathic connection because whenever my sister cried, I used to tell my mom she's hungry or she wants to go outside or she needs a nappy change or she wants this. And within an instant of sort of providing whatever that need was, the change happened. And my mom always used to say to us later in life, it always used to amaze her because it challenged her as a mother to see two siblings understand each other in such a way that was sort of beyond physical words and communication. So that was kind of the first sort of taste test of that. Following that was our great grandmother stayed with us for a period of time because she got really, really ill. And I must have been around the ages of 6 or 7, around that age. And I remember we had to call the ambulance over. And as parents, which is natural, you don't want to create panic for your children. So I think my sister was busy sleeping, but I was awake, and the ambulance had flashing lights outside. And to try and make light of it, they took me to the window to just say, okay, let's just wave and send wishes to Granny that she gets well because she's going to the hospital. And I remember standing there saying, wave goodbye to Granny because she's going home. And it was 2 days later that we got the news that she'd passed away. So that was kind of my first introduction to death. And it it wasn't for me personally as an emotion, and I can remember this so vividly. I wasn't upset. It was more just an understanding of next phase. And I remember being quite jolted by witnessing our family's emotional reaction, which I mean is completely normal. There's sadness, there's grief. But that was kind of my first introduction to death and to dying, because I was almost like detached from the process, not knowing what was next, but having a peacefulness that the next step had already begun. But at the same token, I was also, from a third person objectively, witnessing grief through my mother and my sister. And I remember having sort of asking, like, why are you so sad? And mom was saying, because she's died, because she's died. So that was kind of the first introduction to it. But when you speak of, to go back to your original question, the calling of it, that was kind of only in my 20s when I started doing readings and started traveling. I think we know from a South African standpoint, we've used to the terminology, the calling, your ancestors are busy calling you or inviting you to walk a certain path. And that for me only sort of came in my 20s when I started traveling, because I think when you need to walk a path to begin to feel whether that path resonates with you. And I think that's quite a wonderful thing to discuss, because we all, as humans, are searching for our purpose, our calling, our thing. But I don't think that we're destined to only have one purpose. I feel that there's multiple paths that we need to walk on. And some of those paths feel more natural. And I feel like the further we can walk along that path or honor that path, more of it opens up for us to experience that will either then validate us, this is where you need to be, or
Yeah.
it's time for a change. This is where the compass needle is shifting to. So
Mm.
yeah, that's an interesting question to take me back into that sort of nostalgic reflection. But that's kind of where it all began.
Brilliant. I love that. And just before we started recording, we were talking about the difference in terms of like terminology that people might use when referring to somebody who does the work that you do. Can you just add a little bit of like clarification on like, okay, what is when people are talking about somebody who's a medium or psychic, or like, what's the difference?
Of course, of course. So psychic work in and of itself, I kind of like to think of it as like a left hand and a right hand, because although they are two distinct modalities, they do work together.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's important for us to have an understanding of this, because as we have these conversations, people then can feel into what modality they may be drawn to or where the need is. So psychic work, particularly, is when a psychic or an intuitive will tune into your energetic frequency and explore things like your personality, your dreams, your goals, challenges. There's an element of then expanding beyond the person, possibly into soul identity, physical identity, and the harmony or the relationship between those two aspects. But then beyond that is expanding into different areas of your life. So work, family, relationships, connections, life path. There may even be elements of exploring past, present, and future elements that come up there, because sometimes I'm a firm believer that we need to understand and recognize maybe patterns from the past to assist us to choose anew for the future.
Yes.
And really, what a psychic is doing when you're talking about sort of predictions or future elements is we allowing ourselves to attune to a potentiality that lies ahead. And I always love it, because even I've had this conversation with my students here, because students are starting to practice, and then they'll make certain statements, and then the sitter will then validate, oh my gosh, 3 weeks later this did come to pass. And there is a sense of excitement around that, because you're sort of learning and developing. But it's probably what's most important is that it's not about the psychic predicting something and them being right. It's actually when an intuitive or a psychic feels into a potentiality that aligns with you, it's more to pat yourself on the back because what was spoken about that potentiality, it resonated with you so strongly that you allowed yourself to align with it. So
Yes.
that's an important thing because I think it's important for us to have a conversation about the disposition of power. And I will come to the mediumship explanation here, but this is really, really important, is us as psychics and mediums, when we are doing the work, our job is to illuminate both the visible and the invisible to create a sense of empowerment. And that's really important because I think a lot of people approach a psychic and a medium often in a space of desperation or despair or feeling that sense of being lost, which is completely normal. We all have that, psychic mediums as well. But it's important for us to feel into the resonance of the words and hold to what resonates with us to assist us with our healing and our learning. Because I think when we go to psychics and mediums and we hold on to their every word, it creates a sense of disempowerment. And me
Yeah.
being a reader, I say this to my sitters as well, is this is really a discussion about where you are right now in this moment in time and what you choose to address, heal, change, work towards is what's sort of going to create your path. And that for me is really, really important because it's not about me just saying words to you that you can then go, oh, he said this, it's fine. There's a sense of accountability. And we want that sense of empowerment because you always want the person, whether you're doing psychic readings, mediumship, trance mediumship, healing, all these different beautiful spiritual modalities that have now birthed their way into the world. It doesn't matter which one you choose. You always want to ensure that your sitter or your client is leaving you in a better state of being when they arrived. And that's kind of important, sort of just explaining the difference between the empowerment and the disempowerment, because words can heal and destroy. And that's really important. So to come back to your original question, the difference between psychic and mediumship, I've explained psychic. Mediumship is when the medium is able to connect with the consciousness of a departed loved one. So these are our loved ones or friends or family members, neighbors, the list goes on, but they had already transitioned into the spirit world. And the difference between those two is one is incarnate. We as a psychic would be reading the consciousness within the physical body. And the difference with mediumship is the consciousness that's no longer within that physical form.
Yeah. Beautifully explained. I love that so, so, so much. And I'm really like drawn to like so many of the similarities between the work that you do and the work that I do as well as a birth
Exactly.
keeper and soul midwife, because it's not about I have the power and I'm going to give it to the people I work with. It's almost like, yeah, illuminating their own power and themes of things like
Yeah.
consent and autonomy as well, and boundaries, like the sacred and how does it feel to you rather than this is what I think, this is the path, I'm not the person with the answers. And I just love that mirroring of the work that we
Yeah.
do within that, which leads me really nicely to this thing around intuition. So in birth work, we use this acronym sometimes to help people to make their own decisions. It's known as the BRAINS acronym. And I often say, use it beyond pregnancy and birth. It's a good one for life.
It's a good tool, yes.
Exactly. So B stands for benefits, R stands for risks, A is alternative, I is intuition, N is nothing. So what if I just take a wait and see approach?
Yeah.
S is what is the science? And I find that a lot of people will, when they're having to make a decision, maybe find it easy to really understand and connect with the science and the data. But one of the areas that they might struggle with is the I, the intuition.
Intuition.
So if somebody's like, "Oh, do I have an intuition? How do I connect with it? How do I maintain it?" Do you have any tips on how to help people as well to be able to connect with their own intuition?
Yes, yes, that's a very, very good question. And I love that you've explained the acronym because for me, although I work in this world, I'm such a pragmatic, factual person. I never used to be like that in my younger years because I was completely free spirited, as in like life will move me where I need to move. But in my age, as you will, I like the data, I like the facts as well, and it's healthy. It's important to have that because we're starting to see more of sort of the science and the metaphysical aspects meeting certain markers and points that then validate or complement each other to create a sense of credibility. And I think that's why the mediumship works so well, because mental mediumship or evidential mediumship is based off that. It's based off evidence of the individual to prove life after death and how life transcends, love continues after death. In terms of the intuition aspect, the top tips, that's a very, very good question. Top tips, I would say, for somebody who, firstly, everybody is intuitive. We all have this ability. It's just the difference of whether we choose to build, explore, and refine it or not. It's kind of like going to the gym. Some people are naturally fit and don't feel the need to go to the gym. Other people, we're all different in that way. So the first tip that I'd say, if you're looking to explore your intuition, one that helped me tremendously is journaling. Journaling, not necessarily always journaling as in like, dear diary, today was really my day. More creating data points. So if you happen to explore meditation and you have a certain feeling or a sense, write that down and date it. If you have a dream and maybe you dream that you were in a familiar street, there was one light on and you saw a black cat, write that down. Because what happens as we have these intuitive moments throughout our life, if we're able to document them, we're making it real. And it firstly builds trust within the self that this experience is true because I've now written it on paper. And it doesn't need to make sense in the beginning.
Yeah.
Because as we kind of accrue these different data points, we'll begin to notice that there's a thread or pattern that's running through it. And that gives us something tangible to kind of lean into a little bit more to explore the depth of that. So having those as data points is important. Meditation, fantastic. Because, when you first start meditating, you don't know what to expect. You don't know what you're doing. The first thing you're talking about is, oh my gosh, I just kept hearing the thoughts. But as you stick with it and build a sense of consistency, you begin to relax a little bit more into yourself. And that's when these moments can kind of meet you. And different sensations, sights, smells. Just note it down as think of yourself as an intuitive data capturer, because that's essentially what you're doing. And then as you kind of build that sense of familiarity with it, you'll begin to recognize your intuition, how it shows up a little bit more strongly. And this is a great way to help build a relationship with intuition, specifically more on the subtle notes of intuition, because all of us have had an intuitive hit at some point in our life, but we only defaulted to when it was big and it was bold, and it's usually associated with some kind of a cautionary element. So it's like, oh my gosh, today I got into my car and I usually turn left and something just told me that I need to turn right. Okay, so that intuition has met you big, bold, and as an assistance to avoid a cautionary element. But then we kind of rely on intuition to only meet us in that way. And what I've come to learn through my own work and also training up different students and stuff is, once we've had that experience, that's wonderful. But how am I showing up to allow myself to receive the subtle whispers of intuition? That time that you're sitting on the couch, you just turned on a Netflix show and you have a sip of coffee and you just get this gentle whisper of your intuitive self that's kind of like, everything's going to be okay, things are shifting for you. Those, because it's so soft, we don't value it because we always like sort of big, bold, tangible elements to it. Does that make sense in the way that I'm sort of explaining?
It makes complete sense. I completely get it. And I think people who are listening and watching this will as well. And sometimes it comes through, I guess, even in that, it's taking me back to the start of this conversation about curiosity.
The curiosity.
And having fun with it, almost like that childlike innocence that you made
Absolutely. The
reference to.
playfulness of it.
Absolutely, exactly, and sometimes it doesn't need to be, as you said, a cautionary thing. It could just be something that just goes, oh, let me walk down the street and see, and suddenly like, oh, I was thinking about this, or like we were talking about sunflowers before we started
The sunflowers
recording.
before, yeah.
And it's so funny. I bought sunflowers a couple of days ago, and before I sat down to record this, I was like, should I put sunflowers in the background? And then, of course, you come on camera and there's sunflowers, and I just think,
Sunflowers in the background,
of
yeah. The
course, I
synchronicity.
love it. Exactly. And I always interpret it as this is whatever word you want to insert here, God, the universe, the creator,
Source, what,
playing with me, and having
yeah.
fun with me. And I just love that. And little Tando, going back to that concept as well. I remember, I don't know what your childhood was like in South Africa, but it was almost like people who had this knowing or, mediumship. It wasn't something that was so far removed. I grew up kind of like, oh yeah, there were people who had
Yeah.
these gifts, so it wasn't a huge mystery. And I used to think, oh my goodness, that is so cool. I'd love to be like that. And I didn't think I had that kind of intuition, but having held space at births for a while now, I think it's so interesting sometimes. And this is not something I'll talk about like very frequently or as openly as I'm doing now.
Yeah.
But sometimes
Well, we're in a safe space. So you've created a
Exactly.
safe container for us. It's all
That's
good.
true. That's usually my line. Sometimes I will get a feeling, like a sensation in my body. And I'm like, oh, I have to ask my body, is that me or is that my
Yeah.
mind? Because I've learned over time, just through the relationship we have, and I guess the permission that somebody also gives
Yes.
you, which is why I was bringing up this thing about consent. It's like you entered that relationship with
Yes.
the person, the client, whatever you want to refer to that person with, and you can kind of key into any sensation maybe that
Yeah.
they might be feeling. Even things like I'd be at birth sometimes and I think, oh, my lower back's hurting on the left. And I ask the mom, like,
This
is
where
your
it's
back
at.
feeling a little bit? And I'm like, okay. Or
There
even
it
just
is.
tuning into the spirit of the child. And I'm like, oh, my head's a bit funny. Oh, okay, let's just
that.
try a different position,
Adjust. Yeah.
And I just now like I feel almost like, oh, so like this gratitude of having had this opportunity, I think, through life to really just key into that intuition and to be like, oh, it's not this thing that only certain people have.
People
It's like
can do. Yeah.
we
Yeah.
all have the ability to do that. And it could be
Absolutely.
just small things like even like, oh, I'm thinking about something. One thing that's been coming up a lot for me recently is like, say, if I'm reading something or writing and there's music in the background and then the song will have the word that I'm looking at that second.
Yes.
And I'm
I
like,
love it.
oh
Yeah.
my
Okay.
goodness, this is
Synchronicity.
so
The
cool.
sign has landed. Perfect.
Exactly.
I just wanted to say that you brought up something really, really interesting there. And I think that kind of ties back to what I was talking about with the tips and tricks for intuition. In you sharing your experience and your story, what I think is actually quite valuable for the viewers, for the listeners, is what you've just said here is I allowed myself to just listen. And that is exactly what the intuition is. When we talk about creating the data points, it's also allowing and recognizing how am I allowing myself to become a silent witness to my experience and to my surroundings, not just to who am I and where am I, but also what is influencing around me. And I think you touched on something really important there when you're talking about really listening to the body, because I'm a firm believer that we are spiritual beings here having a human experience. So why would we not allow our body's our intuition to move through our body's intelligence to assist us in that sort of exploration? And like you said there with those clients where you notice sort of a sort of sense of tension or pain in the right side of your hip, that's becoming just a complete witness to yourself and your intuition as it moves through you. It isn't something that you called on, chased after, or summoned. It was in you just being in that state of I'm present. And
Yes.
in this state of presence and holding space with you, I'm becoming aware of. And I think that's really, really important because human experience teaches us that if we want something, we need to take action and chase after it. And whilst that is true, it can sometimes be a little bit challenging from an intuitive or a mediumistic perspective because we can't hunt and call or call certain people forward. All we can do is hold space and move into the deepest state of receptivity to experience that connection with the spirit person or with the intuition. And I think that's exactly what you've just explained here with your beautiful process and how you hold space, because you as well are holding space not just for the mother but for the child as well. So that's the, and you spoke earlier about this, the sacredness of it, and I think that's really, really important, because I feel that the soul, in whatever path it chooses to explore, the more of us that can really truly honor the sacredness in what we find in whatever job or role or activity we do, it creates a sense of depth and meaning, and people respond to that. People respond to that. We have that connection with people. You meet certain people, and there's kind of that unspoken, I don't know much about this person, but like, what a good, like, I just feel good around that we respond to that. The soul knows, so it's good that we sort of speak about this, because I think in this day and age, there's a massive spiritual awakening that's busy happening at the moment, which is so wonderful. But within that, we also need to be willing to exercise healthy discernment, because there's a lot, and I'm sure in your industry as well, there's a lot of people who are quick to hit Instagram and profess how magical and wonderful they are, where you can very clearly see those who are intuitively connected can very quickly see that there's no substance here, that they're not that it can't grow into something substantial, but we can always see when the sacred is missing, when it's
Yes.
just a job. And I think that's really, really important, because there's a job, and then my work is encouraging me to follow my soul's pursuit.
Yes.
So you touched on that nicely, and I think even with the other conversations that you've had on this podcast, sharing those stories so beautifully and intimately, I think it's so wonderful that we can have those conversations, because that holds value to seekers, because we all seekers in some way, shape, or form. I remember the first time that we had met, and I recall us saying how fascinating that the two of us cross paths, where here you stand at the birth, the inception point of life,
Yes.
with the work and the sacredness of you know welcoming this new fantastic soul into the world. And here I sit on the other end of the spectrum, holding space for those that have crossed to that sacred space. So I just found the contrast, but the sacredness still mirrored each other. So
Yes, they definitely
isn't
do.
that
I think,
wonderful?
yeah, it's so wonderful, the different energies that people go through. I completed my soul midwifery training, so that's like being a
Oh, I
death
love
doula,
that.
holding
Yes.
space at that end of life. And what really struck me was just the similarities, it's
Yeah.
that holding space for people when you're not going in with an agenda to be a hero, or it's
Yeah.
all about me, but you're listening, not just the kind of listening with your ears, but you're listening with your heart, the
Yeah.
things that aren't said. And so interesting, just even preparing for this, I was like, oh, what you do and what I do is
The
it's being in
similarity is so similar.
service of
Yeah.
spirit, and
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
that really struck me of like, oh, it's not a contradiction. It's the same thing, but just in
Exactly.
different parts, and
Forms.
just so beautiful. And it reminds me of something as well that I think, with this work, I used to say this thing of like, oh, in order to experience the highest highs as well, and joy and love and all these things that we talk about when we're talking about spirituality as well, there's also the other side, which may also seem like a contrast, but it's holding emotions like grief, and so
Yeah.
years ago I used to, and then say this thing, and then I regretted it, because I was like, I want to just really experience expansion and like the height of like love and connection and joy. But on the other side of the scale, it also is deep grief, and and sadness, and all those emotions that can be really difficult to sit with as well,
Yeah. Yeah.
and what has, in terms of just life and being human, what has this work taught you? Because like you alluded to a bit, it's not just a job. It's not a job at all. It's not like, okay, end of the day, shut the computer, that's it,
Yeah.
We're not just bearing witness to what people are going through. We're also affected. We're holding sacred space, but we're we're witnessing and holding those emotions and holding people through that tenderness or through these sacred thresholds, and I don't think you can hold space in that way, in the way that you do, and not be changed by the experiences that you have. So what has this work taught you about what it means to be human, life, love, purpose? I know that's such a big
That's
question. It's
broad, but
huge.
it's beautiful. It's such a beautiful question. So I think what both from working as a psychic medium and then becoming a teacher, I think in conjunction, what that's really taught me is the power of intention. I think because I kind of walked through life in the beginning, kind of flapping about, whereas now I've kind of learned to be more intentional. I've recognized through obviously different clients the process of grief and how although grief is challenging when we are in it,
Yeah.
there's we need to also have the willingness to see what it's also co-creating for us, because I believe life in duality, there's sort of the light attributes and shadow attributes,
Yeah.
and we need both. It's kind of, I always use the metaphor in teaching of like a seesaw in a park. We need to sit, if we sit on one side, the other side goes up. We need to experience both sides so we can understand what that moderation and balance is for us in this moment. So I think with that, there's that sense of really just exploring, allowing ourselves to sit and have that experience of grief, and knowing that that experience is actually opening us to be able to love more or love more deeply. So those are kind of big key take. Oh, boundaries is really important as well. Boundaries and energetic hygiene. Those two are kind of really, really big things for me. Just being really intentional about, as you do, I'm sure as well. Before sessions, you're setting the space. And when the session is done, you're also closing down the space and allowing myself to not only do regular self check-ins to see where I'm at, but also holding space for myself. Because I think one thing that a lot of light workers do, and I use the term light worker broadly because it doesn't mean that you necessarily in a spiritual line of work. You could be an accountant and be spreading your magic. And I think that's the gift of how spirituality is exploding and expanding, is we're starting to recognize the sacred in connection in whatever we do. And it's finding that match. But what I was going to say with that is just the importance of holding space for ourselves. Because when we are of service, we know most light workers who are of service will probably fall into the trap at some point in time where they overgive, or there's a sense of, or you'll have clients who will really try and take advantage of your generosity.
Yeah.
So there's a line that you sort of learn of, where is that healthy boundary where, no, actually, I appreciate you asking, but I don't have capacity for that right now. Because as you know, in order to do this work, you need to be at your optimal state of being as well. Does that help answer the question there? I know that it is quite broad.
No, that answers it so, 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 so beautifully, because I think, there are life lessons through this work. And it's almost like, when you were talking about boundaries, like it definitely resonates in that practical sense. And then a thought popped into my head of maybe, why people are sometimes scared of these things that we're talking about, like birth and death and spirit, is that fear of, oh, but if I open myself to this, are my boundaries also going to be violated? Am I going to start getting messages or seeing dead people or things like that? Where it's like, no, even just through this work, like you learn the importance of consent. You can and choice, it's not
And
like you
choice,
go
choice,
to
absolutely.
a medium and they tell you this is your path, and then that's just how it
Set in
is. But
stone. Yeah, exactly.
exactly, we realize our own power of, oh yes, I can set this intention and I can create, and that person is facilitating, as you so beautifully explained when you were talking about the difference between psychic and the medium as well. Yeah, so that makes so much sense in terms of somebody had to say to you, but then what is this human experience? Why are we here? If we are these, souls who are having a human experience, what is the purpose of life? What have we come here to do? What would you say?
That is a very deep and loaded question.
It is.
Um, I can only speak from my experience,
Yeah,
and I think, to be honest, I don't have the answer to that.
yeah,
But what I can say is, from my experience, I think through the work that I've done, is traditionally mediumship is all about proving life transcends physical death, that love continues.
yeah,
But I think mediumship is changing in the way that we need it now. And through my own experience, I'm actually finding that mediumship, or just a general sense of connection to spirit, is really showing me the importance of allowing us, and even my sitters, where's the invitation to celebrate life within life?
yeah,
And I think we're sort of starting to redefine our existence now, in terms of, we know that, yes, on paper we need to work to make money to to survive. But I think more of us are moving into the mindset, the collective consciousness shift is like, I'm no longer trading thriving or surviving for existing. And I think
yeah,
that's important, because it's like we're seeing people starting to shift the way that their work-life balance, their connection with family, not necessarily always being governed in cities, but moving out into different areas. And I think that's important, to allow ourselves to have a little bit more of that flexibility. And the human mind, we want to control.
yeah,
And as this work shows you intuitively or mediumistically, even in the work that you've done, is really also recognizing what we don't have control over, and allowing ourselves to move into that state of a deeper trust and a deeper sense of surrender to
yeah,
that experience, to be surprised. And I think that that's the shift in the mindset there, is when we don't have control in something, or we venturing into the unknown, which is a terminology that you'll hear a lot in in any kind of spiritual path. I think we always think of the unknown as being, there's an automatic association of fear that something bad will happen.
yeah.
But if we can shift our mindset to be like, oh, you know what, in this moment, I'm going to invite myself to step into the unknown and hold space to be pleasantly surprised. Like, why not me?
Yes.
Why not me? To
Yeah.
have this wonderful experience. I know that we digress a little bit, but um,
No, you answered that so beautifully, so much better than I could have. And there were so many points where I was like, you've just answered that so wonderfully. And one of the things that you said was it's two words. You said love continues.
yeah,
And I really felt the magnitude of that, because I think people maybe come and see you because they at that like crossroads or threshold, they might be experiencing some kind of loss and they wanting that
yeah,
connection. And for me, just summarizing it all into that love continues. We want to know that, even when somebody has transitioned or when we're going through these different changes in our lives, that no
we're
matter
not
what.
doing it alone.
Exactly, exactly,
Yeah,
absolutely. And that's the thing that will remain when we leave these bodies behind, when,
100%.
where somebody's speaking of us in terms of like, oh yeah, my great grand somebody, aunt or uncle or grandfather or whatever, it's like it's that that feeling of
That
love,
feeling.
which is just so hard to maybe sometimes explain because we're
Yeah,
sometimes thinking about things in our heads as human
exactly.
beings. Our thinking brain, our neocortex is way
Yeah,
bigger than other
yeah.
mammals. But actually just really dropping into that heart
Feeling state.
center and
Yeah,
that love and that knowing, yes, you're not on your
exactly.
own and you are looked after. And
That for me surprises me every single time when I'm doing mediumship in a session. because you can see it, you can feel it, because when you truly are sort of connected into the power of that spirit intelligence, what we're ultimately doing is we're allowing ourselves to sort of blend with the need and the story of the spirit person, but also then allowing the spirit person to recognize and shift to the need of the sitter. And when you get that beautiful blend, I've seen it so many times, is when, when you're bringing through a loved one and you can feel that love. It's palpable. But also, I really want to touch on here is also, like you've mentioned here, is the healing element. Because I think, and this is important, because for those that have lost a loved one, it's like, oh, I really want to hear from this person. I want to feel that connection. And that's one component. But the other component is also, just because we've had a particularly challenging experience with an individual here in the physical world, when they transition, it doesn't mean that that's going to be the same as well. Because if we as humans, we talk about spiritual growth, growing and evolving, so too can the spirit consciousness. So I find that really, really therapeutic, and just witnessing the healing of, maybe a father that's come through who wasn't really a great father, and then apologizing to a daughter and saying that this isn't something that you want, that you should be carrying. I'm going to let me show up differently for you. I mean, that can be a truly magical experience, because it's the invisible, it's the unspoken, it's this thing that's governed or challenged or blocked you in a way that now spirit is recognizing. Let me take accountability for that, but let me help you with this. Like, this isn't just give it to me and buy. It's like,
Yeah.
let us rediscover our relationship in a new way.
Yes.
And that's powerful. So it's not just only the loved ones, it's also, I mean, I've got lots of people in the spirit world as well. Not all of them are of which I've, had great relationships with. But it's really shown me, is like, how can I hold space for you to ultimately hold space for me? Where's the reciprocity here? Because
Yes.
if I can sit and take accountability for my feelings and what maybe your actions did to me, and allow myself to move into an elevated state of being through healing, how too can we complement each other and change that relationship so it can actually be where we want it to be?
Sure.
So that
I
that
knew there was
is
going to be a sure. There it is.
you knew it was coming. And I think that speaks to that love transcends. Love never dies. It's just an invitation to experience it in a different way. And sometimes certain physical experience, that saying, we pick up parents in situations. Some of us don't have great childhoods and these kind of elements, but we also need to recognize that maybe the spirit person that was in that human form didn't have the capacity to give that. But
Yes.
now in spirit, that the consciousness is well aware of, this is the capacity that, and you deserve this. Let's have this together. And that's
Yes.
quite, that for me, that's the sacred work, is when you can see the effect of literally love moving into the person. And I'm sure, have seen the same thing, as when, being a doula, when you're literally seeing the first physical expression of that love and welcoming it into the world. I mean, that frequency must be so palpable in the room, where there's this, where love is so expansive. It's almost like mixed emotions, because you feel joy and sadness at the same time. Within, it's just that elevate. I mean, share a little bit about that, because I know that you do a lot of your sacred work, and it is so similar in the expression.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've just reminded me of how also there's, even within that new beginning, there's the end, it's the end of the
Gestation.
pregnancy. Exactly. And sometimes that can be like some grief. It could be, then it's the beginning. But it's this thing of like, when the heart is really open, when there isn't the thinking, and there's complete presence. I love that you used that word earlier on. And often when partners are saying, what can I do? How can I help? I'd say, there's nothing you can do wrong if you're doing it with love. And sometimes it's not even about doing, it's just that quality of presence. And there's
Yeah.
such a magic, like you can feel it, it's so palpable in the air when everyone is on the same page, everyone within the room, and they almost like they know that they are witnessing a miracle. They just in awe of spirit, of
Exactly.
the mystery as well, and I
Life.
really hope absolutely. And I've had experiences as well, I think, on the other side where been at a birth, maybe in hospital, and people are coming in, and you can just tell there's something missing, and it's almost like that recognition of
Yeah.
this is sacred ground, you know? And I think
Yeah.
we've lost that a little bit in some ways. And sometimes it happens in hospitals, you know, whether
Yeah.
somebody is at end of life, at home, in hospital, just being able to create that space, you know? And I think
Yeah.
sometimes it just takes that being open to it, acknowledging, oh yeah, that's it's almost like reading the subtlety of the energy. And it takes me
Yeah.
back to that intuition of, you know, even if you think you're not in touch with your intuition, when you walk into a room and somebody's just had an argument or
100%.
something's happened, you can
It's
feel it.
palpable. Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
It's thick
exactly.
in the air.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and it's that feeling. And, you know, sometimes I say to people, allow yourself to make friends with the mystery. It's not
Yeah.
always that, like, I need to know what's going to happen and being in
Yeah.
control, but just that complete surrender, that almost like, do you know what? If I was to free fall out of an airplane, like just trusting that you will be held, you know, and there's
Yeah.
so many things that we might not really understand as human beings, but
As we still do. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
exactly. But you feel it, and oh my goodness, there's so many births that just come to mind. I remember one of the last two births that I attended. The second last one was this beautiful twin birth in a hospital. And I think maybe when everyone rushed in as soon as like they realized, oh, twin A is about to be born, and the medics kind of stance was like, we need to rush mum to theater. And immediately I was like, no, we're not doing
No.
that. Read the birth plan. Here's her human
Yeah.
rights. She doesn't want to go there. And then they just realized there's nothing we can do in the moment, but just them being in awe of, oh, mom's standing up, and oh, yeah,
Yeah.
twin one is out. And then 6 minutes later, and it was just like you couldn't help but to just go, wow. Like it was almost
Yeah.
like like having been like next to the mum side and seeing everyone in the room, it was just like, oh wow, you could tell even
Witness
if they
that.
don't
Yeah.
have the language, but it was almost like you've just witnessed this
Something,
miracle.
yeah,
You know,
something
something
magical.
so divine that maybe some people
Wow.
might experience in nature. And the last birth that I attended about almost 3 weeks ago now was a birth where, again, it was just pure intuition, because it wasn't like, okay, now I need to go. This is the time. The contractions are coming this frequently. They spacing out. It was something told me, go now, you know? And I think it
Yeah.
was that
Yeah.
like intuitive, like listening. It didn't make sense if I was to just use my head to try and time it. And then when I got there, I remember saying to the couple, oh, I'll stay for 30 minutes and see what happens. And within the first 15 minutes, it was like, okay, this is maybe still a bit early. And then the
Yeah.
last 15 minutes, it was like, okay, the
It's a
midwife
go.
might not get here, but you are safe and baby is
You're
coming, you
all
know,
good. Yeah.
and just seeing them afterwards, just this bubble, it was honestly like you could just the change in the air and the just
Amazing.
the love, you know. And I know
Yeah.
sometimes it's not every birth that maybe parents meet their baby and they filled with loves
Yeah.
all of a sudden. Sometimes it takes time.
We have to grow into it.
Absolutely. You wouldn't pick a stranger off the street and be like, I love you, come and live with me, you know.
Yeah.
You grow
You
into
gotta
it.
grow into it. Yeah.
But just that energy and just being open, you know, I think sometimes even the most skeptical people, or people who think you have to be one or the other, you either have to be
Yeah.
scientific or
Yeah.
woo woo. It's like, no, it's these are not separate things. You can be a holistic person. All of this completely
Yeah.
makes sense. And I always think, gosh, what an honor to bear witness to that, you know, and to
And to share in that journey with them. Like, I think that's what I always talk about is thank you for sharing your loved ones with me. Thank you
yeah,
for sharing in the journey, allowing me to share in your journey, because
yeah,
that's a super sacred thing. I
yeah,
mean, if somebody rings your doorbell to try and drop off a package, you're not just going to let anybody in. So
yeah,
to be brought into the most intimate spaces of somebody's energy, life, birth, death,
yeah,
that's a truly sacred thing, and
absolutely.
one that should be valued. That's what's it should really be valued and respected. And I think that's important in however whatever modality or application it forms in.
Yes.
Um, the rules still apply in that way.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, going back to when you were describing meeting your sister as well, you know, we know that babies come in and they are just so open
Yeah.
energetically and maybe so much easier to connect with in that space, just like some people as they transition, depending on how that is and how safe and held they may feel within that. But there's that absolute connection and just
Yeah.
that knowing, you know, and yeah, just it's such an honor to be able to bear
To
witness
be
to that
in it.
and
Yeah.
connect and just be in that, you know, and I think it does definitely again change the way that you see life, the
Yeah.
gratitude as
The
well, you know,
gratitude.
and the like, you know, you go from like I think this work should always have a warning of like, oh, you're never going to see a tree as oh, it's just a tree, you know, you're just in awe of life, and I
Yeah.
think the beauty of it is it's not even just those experiences that you get that beauty from. It could be the what someone might call just the mundane, the
Yeah.
connection to another
The
human
sacredness of
being.
the simple. Yeah.
Exactly. The sacredness of, oh my gosh, I get to wake up today and
Yeah.
I get to experience life being in this human body, you know, and
Yeah.
just really understanding and feeling what an honor it is and that the magic is everywhere, you know. We don't have to be
Absolutely.
cut off from
Both
it.
within and without. Yeah, we don't have to be cut off from that. Yeah,
Exactly. And
100%.
even in death as well, just being able to acknowledge that connection as well when our
Yeah,
departed loved ones are connecting with us, you know, you can
yeah,
really feel the sacredness within that as well.
absolutely. I've seen that with a couple of readings. Is like you've spoken about sort of these magical experiences from birth. It's quite interesting because I'm doing a little bit of a call and answer with you here. Seeing like a loved one come through from spirit and thank an individual for their end of life care, or being unconscious and not being able to speak and recognizing, I know that you held my hand, that you kissed my head, and then you put on socks on my feet, and that the two socks were two different colors because I liked to wear uneven socks. Do you know, like these kind of evidential things that then, because when we're sitting with somebody as they are readying themselves to transition, we know that it's a difficult and challenging time. But also to have a spirit person come and say, thank you so much for holding that space for me and making it such a gift for me to transition in that way.
Yeah.
Or, validating them. Maybe granny was in the hospital bed, but grandfather was already on spirit side, and validating the person who was looking after granny, that grandfather was there to help welcome. All these little things in the way that we sort of prepare. It's quite magical. It's quite magical and quite sacred. And yes, we will still be met with the grieving experience of losing that loved one, but to remember, and this is what I talk about when I was saying earlier about the visible and the invisible, is reminding the sitter, actually, look what you were able to provide for this person in this moment. And it comes down to that presence. And I have had sitters that have come and been very upset because they were ready to be that person who was ill, but happened to step out the room and then they passed. Because the mind was like, I want to be there for you when you do it. But spirit is like, you've done enough. You needed to step out for that moment. You know.
Exactly. Yeah,
And we
and
hear
that's
these different stories,
yeah, absolutely, and it's such a common experience that
Yeah.
happens in that way where at the moment and it's like it's, I don't know what it is about us and being human beings, and sometimes maybe honing in on the like the 1% that's like,
Yeah.
oh, I wish I could have done this differently. And it's like, no, it's those repeated acts of love, like you so beautifully painted. It's that gentle when you're sitting with somebody at the end of life, the touch,
Yeah.
maybe it could be doing something like just
Singing a
sitting.
song,
Yeah, I
talking,
was
reading,
about to
reading
say
it.
that. Exactly.
We're in tune, my friend. We're in tune,
Yes,
Shoma.
exactly. Yes, we definitely are. And just holding space and the gentleness. And I think this is almost like that duality of maybe when the language fades away, and there's so much vulnerability, birth or at
Yeah.
death, but
Yeah.
people get it, that energy speaks as well within
Energy
that
speaks.
moment,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love that you said as well about the different color socks, and just because it brings in that element of, usually when you were communicating with spirit, you realize, gosh, spirit is just so full of humor as well,
So much humor, so much humor. And I think you also then just highlighting the personality of that individual.
Exactly. And it
Yeah.
answers that question almost like about what I think is also part of the answer to why are we here? It's to experience joy too,
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
like we're here to sit this big exam and there's this big
I know,
teacher in
take
the
the test.
sky. Exactly, going, yeah, you've failed that one, you've passed
Yeah.
that one. It's just that capacity for joy when you are whatever is going on and you just catch that glimpse of joy, just like especially
Yeah.
babies have it, and it's, yeah, that I think that's a core part of why we're here, to
Exactly.
really experience the fullness, the richness of life. And that, like you beautifully said earlier on, why not me?
Yeah.
Like
Why not me?
sometimes we put those limits on ourselves. It's like, why? Of course, life can be magical for me. Of course, I am truly
Yeah.
loved and held and adored, and
Yeah.
that's not in an egotistical way, but it's just when you realize the love and the support that
Yeah.
is there. And one of the things you reminded me of is something I've never shared before. I remember holding space for a birth at many, many, many years ago. And this birth was just so beautiful. But I remember as the baby was being born, really feeling the sense of there's another being here, that was really
Right.
something. I just
Yes.
remember that moment the baby was born. And afterwards, I couldn't shake that feeling of like I wasn't holding space on my own. There was something here. And then I found out afterwards that the mom's mom had tragically passed away a few years ago. And I was like, as soon as
And there
they
she
told
was.
me that, I was like, that's who it was. Like, and
It's
that,
instantly made sense. Yeah.
oh, that love continuing, and I
Yeah.
don't think I shared it with this family, but I knew that, oh,
There's a
that's what
knowing.
was
Yeah.
going on. There was this other feminine presence there, and I didn't need to make sense of it, but that's exactly what it was,
I
love continuing.
I love that also having that experience because although you didn't necessarily share it with them, there was an honoring that you had of just and again coming back to the intuition of just witnessing. It's like I'm aware of this. I don't need to understand it or explore this further. I just need to recognize it for what it is.
Yeah.
To be, that whole full circle moment in that one moment in time. How wonderful.
Yeah. Questions just popped into my head, so I'm going to
Go
ask,
for gold.
do you know if there were people within your lineage who were doing the work that you were doing, or that you are doing, and being in service of spirit?
So I am aware on my mom's side of the family and on my dad's side of the family. On my dad's side of the family, it was further up in generations. Never did it as a reader, but was very interested in the work. And I know that there's stories that I got passed down from sort of different family members that he would literally have these announcements and basically do predictions and stuff. And it was very interesting because when I started exploring spirit and my intuitive self at a young age, I think he's a great great grandfather, if I'm not mistaken. I saw this gentleman in meditation and he told me not to go into corporate. It's not going to fulfill me. He's like, I did that because he basically said to me, he's like, don't go the corporate route. I did that and I should have done what you're doing. He's like, follow your heart.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that I did. I'm
Oh,
so glad that I did because now
I'm so glad that you did.
Bless you. So yes, it is on both sides, but not at the capacity that I'm maybe sort of doing it now. And I think this ties back to what you were saying earlier, is traditionally this kind of connection with intuition or with spirit was predominantly associated with like a psychic or a medium or a sangoma or a shaman or a witch doctor or these sort of traditional standpoints. Whereas now I think that it's actually starting to be expressed more commonly across the board. And I think that's actually such a healthy thing
Yeah.
because it means that we are now starting to invite ourselves to have the experience, not
Yeah.
rely on somebody else to tell it how it should be.
Yes,
And I
exactly.
think that's important. Yeah.
Yeah, that is powerful because you have to use your discernment and your
Yeah.
intuition even when you're sitting with somebody who is a medium or a psychic to go, does this resonate with me? Does this
Yeah.
feel okay within me? Yeah, so I love that.
And that's good. And I'm gonna hop this in here quickly. For anybody who's sort of listening and they're looking to choose a psychic or a medium, or a healer or whatever sort of practitioner you're looking for, I always say, trust where you're drawn to, say the name, feel the name of that person, let that resonance move through you, look for reviews, look for recommendations, because I know this because a lot of my clients are sort of through referrals and recommendations, which is wonderful. But it's important for us to really feel into that as well, because it might not necessarily be the person for you.
Yes.
Because I remember through my own journey going to lots of different psychics and mediums in my youth. And they were really catalytic from a learning perspective for me, because I think for me personally in my journey, I used to go with three friends. We used to book back-to-back readings, and all three of us were spiritual, and we all
Gosh, I
talking about
knew we
different
were meant to
things.
be friends when I was younger. Could have stayed on it with the gang.
In with the gang. We may have even crossed paths in Derbs and Soweto at some
Yeah.
point or another. But we used to go for readings regularly, just to sort of sense check, and we'd come back and we'd drive in the car, a nice little road trip, share our stories, what was said, blah, blah, blah. And it was through that I got to experience readings from both really, really good readers and not so good readers. But in the beginning, I kept viewing the not so good readers as like, oh, what a waste of money. But now I actually look back and I'm like, what a wonderful lesson that was. Because if we went for readings and the same stuff was coming up, and this is important because you might go to different readers and the same stuff comes up, there's an invitation there to actually do more work on that. Because I used to get upset. It's like, oh, why is the same stuff coming through? But it was an invitation for me to make the changes that I needed to make. And seeing it come from different people, there was no sort of denying that. It's like, okay, the thread of commonality, I had to recognize that I was the common denominator in my story here. So I had to make the change. But with that, also my friends being really, really intuitive and me exploring this journey, all I really wanted was somebody to tell me, you are psychic. This is what it is. And who better to do that than to go, a reader. But I never got that gratification. Both my friends were told, oh, you're intuitive, you're psychic, you're intuitive. I never got that gratification, not once. And I thought to myself, I was like, well, this is a big blow to the ego. Like, that, how are we as a collective, the three of us, having these experiences, seeing spirit, talking about it, and then not getting that? But what I had to recognize was part of my journey was to not be told, but to develop that trust with self. And it was through the rigorous training and development and exercises and coming to the UK to study at, Arthur Findlay College and College of Psychic Studies, Tony Stockwell's Soul Space, all these different places to really sort of further enrich that knowledge and refinement. I recognized I actually didn't need that approval, but it was something that, it was the quick fix. It was the double click shortcut on your desktop. And Spirit was like, no, you need to do this is the journey, let it unfold.
what a beautiful lesson and a gift, rather than that, like,
Ah,
oh, people are
sometimes a
going
hard
to
one.
define me, that you had
Yeah,
to come into like, okay, actually, what do I know about myself? What do I
yeah.
feel? And that you have that power within yourself as well.
And
Yeah.
it was really an invitation. That's when I sort of recognized when I started traveling, I was like, this is, and again, it maybe ties back into the question about life, is this is my invitation to grow into myself. How can, on a daily basis, if I wake up, how can I, am I willing to invite myself to be the embodiment of my wisdom and my truest self?
Yes.
Because knowing wisdom and then embodying it are marginally different things. Because we all know, okay, don't do this because this will happen. So we can know the wisdom, but I think that's the disconnect in society at the moment. Is a lot of people know things, but nobody's actually embodying it.
Yeah.
Um, Actually, I shouldn't say that. Not nobody. We are. We're learning to embody it in a deeper way, and that's important.
Yes, that's very, very important. I love that. You said something earlier on, and I think the phrase you used was spiritual hygiene. Is that the right phrase you
Yes.
used?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so we know that like when you're working so closely with people as well, like and we spoke about that, like the consent and the boundaries part, but how do you make sure that maybe somebody's watching or listening and they also, are some kind of journey keeper holding space for people and they're thinking, okay, yes, I'm open and I'm in touch with my intuition and I get these messages, but just that kind of like when you're closing the space with working with a client, do you have any kinds of rituals or things that you do? Just like maybe be washing hands or
It's
salt
a very good
baths?
question. That's a very good question. So, firstly, it's always gratitude. So whenever I finish a session, I'm usually closing down a session and then preparing for the next session. So I always want to work with gratitude first. So I'm saying thank you to the presence of spirit intelligence that's presented themselves today. But also if you've come for a reading, your stuff is your stuff. So I want to wrap that in a nice little bag and gift it back to
Yeah.
you with love because it's not for me to
Yeah.
keep. I do wash hands. I like to burn either sage or probably more Palo Santo because, obviously in the UK with fire alarms, it's a little bit tricky. Not like South Africa where we can
I've got some in
burn and
bed for
eject
here.
it. There you go. I was just about to say, like back home in SA, where you could put a big stack of Impempo into like a pot and just let it burn.
Yeah.
Salt bars, I actually really enjoy doing. I try and do that sort of really regularly and just any kind of grounding or getting into nature.
Yeah.
Again, the preparation for it is all about intention. What am I holding? What are my hopes for the sitter or the client? Inviting space for spirit, but really just allowing myself to move into that centered space. If energies do feel a little bit heavy following a session, I may do a cleansing or do some gridding, energetic gridding in the space. But more often than not, that's not required. But for me, the gratitude and the thanks for that experience is always the truest form of maybe even some aura cleansing if that's required.
Yeah.
But I want to honor the end because as there's a beginning, everything must come to an end. And I want it to be a clean snip so that the next session can have its blank canvas in whatever
Yeah.
shape or form that's going in as well. And it's
Yeah.
important, the opening and the closing, because
Yeah.
when I'm finished the day, when I'm closed, it's like if you don't pay rent, you can't hang around here. It's like,
Exactly. That's true. You don't
especially
want.
when it comes to spirit, it's like, okay, I don't mind you popping in, but like, you know, unless you family, I don't really want to be hanging out with you on the couch watching Netflix.
It is so, so, so true. That's cracked me up so much because I had this experience where I was teaching recently and we wanted to have a minimum of 5 participants, but we had three. And I remember the person I was organizing the teaching was like, should we still go ahead? I was like, yeah, we're definitely still going
Doing
ahead. I
it,
don't want
yeah.
people's grandmothers hanging out saying, well, you said this, you set the intention.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Oh,
Oh, I love
goodness.
that so, so, so much. Um, and then is there anything else that you feel that maybe people who are wanting to get in touch, for example, that you'd like to share some of your offerings? I know you do mentoring, you hold circles as well. Do you
That's
have
correct. Yeah.
any, yeah, if somebody wants to find out a little bit more about you?
Lovely. They can certainly head to my website, tyronecusack.com. I'm offering readings, of course, as we've spoken about, but also different development circles and one-to-one mentoring. I'm also a part of Anteato, and myself and Leslie Malone run the Mediumship Hour, which you've come to. Mediumship Hour, which is every Tuesday at 7 p.m. UK time. You can head over to anteato.com where you'll be able to sign up for the Mediumship Hour. It's a free event. It's a 1-hour mediumship demonstration. And that's quite wonderful because we all kind of gather in the community to share in the love and the messages of spirit. And there's a fantastic array of different international mediums that come to share their love and their connection. So that's where people can reach me.
Brilliant. I will make sure to include all of that information as well. So before we finish, something that's becoming somewhat of a bit of a tradition on this podcast is asking the question, what do you think makes a good death?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. A hard one, but a good question. I would say, talking purely from the perspective of how many different ways I've connected with different passings and people, I would say what makes a good death is not the way you go out, but your how sort of feeling into how willing was I to celebrate life within life. Because I think that phrase, celebrate life within life, is such a wonderful aspect of love, connection, community, legacy, fulfillment. And that for me would be, that's when, when you feel that sense of it's time, I've lived life well.
Yeah.
I think that's a good death. And as we sort of come to know, it's very difficult to choose when we're going to have that moment or know when that moment's going to happen, and make the most of it all. Make the most of it all.
Yes.
Does that help? I know that it's not a traditional answer to what's a good
No, I
death.
love that. I love that because it's that perspective. But what I love about that answer is it's something as well that because we don't know always when it's going to happen, I think thinking about death, one of the gifts that it can give us is to make us more present to life, you know?
Present to
So
life.
even that answer just brings it back to every single day, when the sun rises and the sun sets, that's a beginning and that's an ending, but just being present to okay, I'm alive. How can I celebrate the life that I'm living now on a daily basis? Whether it's even just reflecting on that question at the end of the day, in something as simple as lying in bed and going, okay, what can I celebrate about today as well?
Yeah.
And it just really brings about that, oh, it's those small things, it's not
It's the
this
small things.
big grand, okay, bang, and I'm out necessarily, and I think that when we hold these two beautiful rites of passage, birth and death, with sacredness, what it brings us to is that moment and the in between, that breath element, hence the name of the podcast, Birth, Breath, and Death.
Death, yeah.
And it just brings that presence, that magic that we were talking about as well,
100%.
And
100%.
I know I said the last question, but I'm taking that back. And I'm going to ask you again. I could talk to you forever.
I love it. It's so relaxed. It's so casual. I really appreciate that.
Good. I'm making up for the times that I was like, well, I wish we were friends when we're in our youth. We've got decades to make up
We've
for.
got plenty more time to yeah, exactly.
Exactly. How has your understanding of life changed because of your understanding of death? The question.
That's a very good question. That, I think, ties into what we're talking about, celebrating life within life. Because what I've learned through the mediumship is we are busy we are sort of proving life after death, but actually the expansion of that is encouraging the sitter to really celebrate life within life. And that's
Yeah.
probably the biggest takeaway, and something that I still draw true to in that regard. And
Yeah.
I'd say from an intuitive perspective is, give yourself permission to get to know yourself more, because I see that a lot with my clients from an intuitive perspective, is sometimes exploring aspects of themselves that they either were aware of but were sort of pushing away, or weren't even aware of at all. And I felt like that's the invitation here is,
Yeah.
how can I get to know me more? How can I deepen the quality of my spiritual experience?
Yeah. Brilliant. I love that answer. It's that depth of life and I think that's why like that question probably popped into my head and about the like your lineage and if there were people who would hold in space in this way. Because I think even just the fact that there are loved ones or even ancestors we may not have even met, but the fact
No,
that
yeah,
they're
exactly.
so interested in our lives as well, it's just like, oh, I've got that support. And there's something there is something that is, I don't know, juicy about the human experience that you can't
Yeah,
experience maybe when
yeah.
you are in spirit form, but just that like I'm
Well,
here.
that's what they gather around us, to still have those to share in it. And I know that you know, my my grandfather really enjoyed to have a beer, and I often find that if I'm having a beer, I'll notice his presence, because it's, to be a part of that. Or, I mean, terrible example to give, but it fits appropriately for him in that regard. But having these different moments where you kind of have that connection. It's not that spirit doesn't have a job and they're not learning things and don't have their own responsibilities in the spirit world. I'm not saying that at all, because I do believe that they are absolutely learning, growing, and have their own sort of things to look into and do. But when we sort of beyond that physical body, we are, in essence, that omnipresent aspect. So to be able to
Yes.
be, me and you can have a connection with a loved, maybe a loved one in spirit for you, and another family member who's on the opposite end of the earth can have a similar experience at the exact same time.
Yeah.
And I've seen that show up so many times. So I love that, just kind of the invitation of, what does spirit see of my world? And I feel like that they'll always guide you, but what's important is they cannot do things for you.
Yes.
And that's a key difference. It's like, if I ask, then I also need to be willing, like, that old adage, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Yeah.
Same is true. I can ask for guidance, but then am I willing to receive it? Here we go. We've taken you to the water. What are you going to do with it now?
Yeah.
Or, the water that you seek is over that mountain. Are you going to go? The
Yeah.
healing that you need is right here related to this. Are you going to partake?
Yes.
You asked for support in your family and financial dynamic. Here is an opportunity. Are you going to take it?
Yeah.
Are you going to align yourself with it? So interesting to just think a little bit
Yeah.
differently, in the way that, most importantly, that we're not alone, and that the journey is the journey.
Yes, exactly, exactly. I think with exploring this path, the thing that's always stayed with me and that I've just felt so grateful for getting this message is that we're not alone, just
Yeah.
even that like brings so much comfort, and
Yeah.
and that interest of like, oh yeah, there are spirits, beings looking out for me, and helping
Yeah.
to guide me and
And there to
having
support you when
fun with
needed.
me. Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
And being playful. I think that's a really important point, because we've had these conversations, some really, really deep conversations today. But what's also important is that it's not always deep and intense all the time. We need to have a little bit of playfulness and
Yeah.
curiosity through the process as well, because spirit loves to have a laugh. That I can guarantee you. And if you're anything like my family members, they'll certainly take the mick as well.
Brilliant. I love that you acknowledge was it your great grandfather as well? Yeah.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, it's interesting because my grandfather and my grandmother, they seem to do a lot of work with me when I'm busy doing the work.
Okay.
More so now, but there is an awareness. And I think that's when I started exploring mediumship. That's when I started researching my lineage,
Yeah.
building that family tree to be, oh, who's who? I've heard this name. Where do they fit in?
Yes.
You know?
Exactly. I love that. I love that so much because I feel the same way about my grandmothers. They'll show up in readings all the time. And it's interesting because when people ask me, oh, how did you get into this birth work? I'm like, oh, I was so lucky to live with my gogo, my grandmother, and she was the
Yeah.
person who was responsible for looking after my cousins after they'd had babies, all the women in my family that come stay with
Wonderful.
her. And that's who I learned
Yeah.
from. And then a few months later, I learned that her sister, who she was so close to, who I don't she's my gogo as well. She's
Yeah.
my great aunt. She
Yeah.
used to catch babies in the family. And I just think even just that thing when sometimes I speak to midwives and they're like, oh yeah, my great grandmother was a midwife, or we see that thing where there's like tendencies maybe sometimes
Of
within
course. Yeah.
families,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh yeah, we've always been in the locksmith or farming industry,
Wow.
something
Yeah.
like that,
Yeah.
and for me it's always just that confirmation of, oh yeah, like we've got that support
That
from them as
support.
well,
Yeah.
and even sometimes drawing on the other spirits
Yeah.
that we might not know who are working for the highest good and going,
Of
okay,
course. Of
like,
course.
you know what? I need some guidance here. Can you please show up?
Show up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Help me. Show me the
Yes,
way.
exactly.
Give me the sign that I'm looking for.
Exactly. And then it's like, oh, the
I love
signs are
that.
everywhere.
I love it. And how magical to be able to continue, not out of obligation, but out of passion and soul calling, to be able to continue that legacy of your gogo,
Yeah. Yeah.
of both of them, in the way that the work that they've sort of, manifested and shared, of being of service.
Exactly, and what feels nice about it is that then it feels less heavy, like I'm this weird person trying to go
Yeah.
down this route, like, why aren't I following the corporate path? It's like, "Oh,
Yeah.
no, okay," like,
This feels
and I
aligned
don't
for
need to
me.
do all of this
Yeah.
on my own, I'm not at a birth thinking I need to be the hero, I need to know all of this. It's like, oh, there's this
Exactly.
huge, amazing, ancient wisdom that's there, that thread, and really connecting to that is just
Exactly.
so
And I'm
insane.
allowing it to be expressed through me.
Yes, absolutely.
Lovely. I love that. I love that. I'm sure your grannies would be truly, truly proud.
Oh, thank you. Likewise, I'm sure that all the spirits in your lineage who've done this work as well would be.
We hope. We hope.
Yes. Tyrone, thank you.
That's
Thank
sweet
you.
pea. Thank you, Tanda. That was lovely. I have thoroughly enjoyed my time here, and thank you so much for not just holding space for me, but all the other wonderful guests that you've had, and for keep continuing the important conversations. And I look forward to see where your podcast goes and all the wonderful connections and stories that you'll continue to share. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of it. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much again for your generosity, your time, and just the sharing of your wisdom and continuing to just open up space for this work, for so many people that you've held space for as well.
Bless you.
And
Thank you.
yeah, thank you for not going
I
down the corporate path.
I enjoyed. I love it. Everybody is unique and different, and it's such a wonderful gift for me to be able to share in their experiences and their love and connections. So I don't take that for granted. I really do appreciate that.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Blessings to you. Thank you so much.